For this lab, we'll be finishing up on the pelvic limb. So we're working on the distal pelvic limb on the attached right hind limb of the calf specimen. And we'll start with a craniolateral view of that region. So here we're looking at the attached right hind limb of the calf specimen, and we're looking at it from a craniolateral view. So here's cranial on this side, and this would be lateral over here. So I just want to start with this cranial group here because it will appear to be one big muscle in the calf, and it's actually several muscles that are all hidden here. So you want to start with this group, and it's going to be in all that deep fascia that we have here. So that very thick fascia you'll have to cut through and then isolate these muscles. So the first muscle here that's on the very cranial surface, craniolateral side, is the fibularis tertius muscle. So if you remember in the horse, that's very different looking in the calf. So this is very fleshy versus in the pony, it was very tendinous. So this is that fleshy muscle right on the top is fibularis tertius. And you'll notice that there's 2 extensor retinacula versus the 3 that we saw in the pony. So those are just binding those tendons down as the extensor tendons travel distally. So after you find this fibularis tertius, you need to try and find the borders and isolate it from the other muscles that it's attached to. So on the cranial aspect here, you'll have a seam that you need to find along this side that will differentiate it from the cranial tibial muscle. So the cranial tibial is actually this one right underneath. That's on the cranial aspect of the tibia. And so that muscle, you can kind of peel away. It's pretty thin. Here you can see it between the probe and my finger there. And that's the cranial tibial muscle. We'll see that again here on the other side once we get around all these muscles. So cranial tibial muscle, fibularis tertius muscle, and then you have the long digital extensor muscle. And in the calf, that will have 2 bellies. So here I've separated out those 2 bellies, so you can see that there's 2 of them, and they kind of fuse with that fibularis tertius proximally. So here are the 2 bellies. You have a medial belly and a lateral belly, and so when you separate them, you can kind of follow the tendons and trace those down distally in the limb, and the one on the medial side is the medial head, and that one on the lateral side is the lateral head. And then you also have this short digital extensor that they're kind of attaching to right here. And it's bigger than it is in the pony. So I just wanted to mention it so you know what that is. That's the short digital extensor. And you have the long digital extensor coming down here and kind of joining with that. So long digital extensor in the calf has those 2 heads, medial and lateral. And then underneath that, you'll again see that cranial tibial muscle. So right here is that cranial tibial from this side. And underneath the cranial tibial muscle, you want to dissect out the cranial tibial artery. So here's the cranial tibial artery. And if you trace that all the way down, it's just like in the pony where it crosses the tarsus. It's called the dorsal pedal artery. So here, if you pull it out, there, it's going to be called dorsal pedal as it crosses the tarsal joint. And then it will be called the dorsal metatarsal artery. So here, if I maybe go to the other side, just pull it out here, is the dorsal metatarsal artery. So you want to make sure and see that at all 3 stages there, where it's cranial tibial, dorsal pedal, and dorsal metatarsal artery. All right, then we also have this vein that's kind of in our field of view here as well. So this is the cranial branch of the lateral saphenous vein in the calf. So that's different than the pony. The pony, we saw the other side. We saw the medial saphenous vein that had a cranial branch kind of coming over the tarsus. But here we have the cranial branch of lateral saphenous vein. So that will be kind of in your way. So try and work around that. And then we'll move caudally, and we'll identify the fibularis longus muscle. So this is this triangular shaped muscle right here, and it's the fibularis longus that we didn't see one of those in the pony, so this is different in the calf. So fibularis longus, and then just caudal to that on the very most lateral side, you'll see the lateral digital extensor. So that one is going to be right here. So lateral digital extensor muscle. And the lateral digital extensor muscle, you can trace the tendon down distally as well. And so you'll see that traveling here, and then it kind of travels alongside your long digital extensor tendons distally in the limb. So again, lateral digital extensor muscle and the fibularis longus muscle here on the lateral side. All right, so now we're going to take a look from this lateral but caudal view rather than the cranial view and see some of those structures. So here we're looking more towards the caudal aspect of the animal. So caudal is here and then cranial's on this side. So we're looking at the caudal end because we need to follow that sciatic nerve that we saw before. So you need to reflect your gluteo-biceps muscle, which again, you need to be careful not to transect through the whole thing and cut it off so that it falls off. So make sure you try and keep that attached. And look for that really large sciatic nerve. So it should be pretty easy to find. So here we've got sciatic nerve coming out, coming down the leg here. And so you're looking for the branching point where it branches into the fibular nerve and the tibial nerve. So here, I'll put that back in place. So here you've got the common fibular, or just fibular nerve here, and that goes a little more cranially. And then you've got the tibial nerve, which is this big branch that goes in between the two heads of the gastrocnemius muscle. So here we've got the gastrocnemius muscle, and this is the lateral head. And then the tibial nerve splits the muscle into the lateral head and the medial head on the other side here. So if I move this, hopefully you can see there's a medial head versus the lateral head and the nerve going right in between those two. Another thing I want to point out here that we didn't see in the pony is this popliteal lymph node. So this little, it's pretty big actually, the lymph node right here. So popliteal lymph node is going to be right there, right by the gastrocnemius. So try and see that if you can. And then as you're working on identifying the heads of your gastrocnemius, you're going to work down distally and find the calcanean tendon, which is this huge tendon right here that goes over the hock. So this is the calcanean tendon that your gastrocnemius tendons tie into. And then you're also going to look for the superficial digital flexor. And so, again, like we saw in the pony, you can try and separate out the tendon of the superficial digital flexor and then trace that proximally. You can move up and try and isolate that inside the gastrocnemius muscle. So then you're going to transect the lateral head of the gastrocnemius muscle, and you're going to pull that head away. Try not to cut your nerves. And then in between the two heads of the gastrocnemius muscle, you will see the superficial digital flexor muscle. So again, this will look different than it did in the pony because we have a very fleshy muscle rather than tendinous. So in the pony, this muscle was fairly tendinous, and in the calf, it's very fleshy. So superficial digital flexor muscle, and that's the tendon you see going around and entering into this calcanean tendon along with the gastrocnemius tendons. So you want to see that. Then we also want to just take a look at the calcanean bursa. So here I've got that superficial digital flexor tendon, and you just want to cut on the medial side of that tendon as it goes over the hock, and you're just going to pull it off and see that the shiny space inside here is the calcanean bursa. So just that shiny pocket that's usually filled with fluid would be the bursa. And then the tendon will continue distally down the limb. The other thing I want to point out here, so we're going to follow the tibial nerve kind of from the medial side though, and I'll show that to you in just a minute. But the tibial nerve will come through and then it splits into medial and lateral plantar nerves. And so while we're on this lateral view, I just want to point out that the lateral plantar nerve is going to be distal in the limb here as it goes to either side of the superficial digital flexor tendon. You'll have a lateral and a medial plantar nerve. So this one is just the lateral. And now we'll take a look from that medial side. And one other thing before we do that, I just want to see if we can maybe see a little bit here. I keep dropping my probe, it's not helpful. All right, so here I just want to point out that right here is the lateral digital extensor muscle, but just caudal to that is this big group of muscles. And so if you can uncover that and pull some of that fascia off, you'll see that there's different heads to this, and this is the deep digital flexor muscle. So right here, deep digital flexor. And you've got a medial head, a lateral head, and then the caudal tibial. So from this view, we're mainly seeing the lateral head of the deep digital flexor. And then I'll show you the rest of it from the medial side. So now we'll take a look at that medial side. So now we're on that medial side, looking at this distal part of the calf limb. And I want to take a look at the tibial nerve as it comes through right here. So this is that tibial nerve, and it comes down, and it's actually going to run through your tarsal canal. So here I've already dissected out this medial plantar nerve, but if you can imagine, this is covered by this fascia. I'll kind of push it back in there. But this fascia covers over, and so this is the retinaculum. So this band of thick fascia that goes over and keeps tendons and nerves in place. And so you'll have to kind of cut through that very superficial layer of that to get to this nerve. So right here you have tibial nerve coming down, and you'll see this split. So you've got the medial plantar nerve that will come to the medial side, and then the lateral plantar nerve, which we just talked about a moment ago, on the other side. But here's where that starts. So it splits off here, lateral plantar, and then we'll dive through and go through the tarsal canal and come out the other side where we saw it over here. And then this is the medial plantar nerve, so that's going through the tarsal canal right under this retinaculum, and we'll come out and continue distally on the medial side. So medial plantar nerve here. Then we'll take a look here and finish up our dissection of the deep digital flexor muscle. So here's that big muscle group. Right here is the deep digital flexors. And so you've got this medial head is right here, and it kind of goes off to the side of the rest of the muscle mass. And so this part is the medial head of the deep digital flexor, and it comes off and has its own little sheath around its tendon, and then continues distally and will join up down here. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. And here you've got that caudal tibial piece of the deep digital flexor, but then you're also seeing that pretty large lateral head from the medial side as well. So that lateral head, the caudal tibial part, and then this medial head, and then all will come down through the tarsal canal and join the tendons. So we'll take a look at that. So I do want to mention that this tarsal canal is covered by extremely thick flexor retinaculum. So if you can see this, it's very, very thick. It's almost as thick as the tendon is, so just be aware that it's very thick and you're not actually cutting the tendon when you cut through this. So here I'll pull out the tendon. So here we've got the deep digital flexor tendon. And when I pull that out, you can see this part, this little piece coming in and joining that right here. And that is from this medial head of the deep digital flexor. So they all come together and the tendon continues distally down the limb. So those are all deep digital flexor muscle.